The Glass Castle, written by Violet da Vinci. Dusk bled amber through the forest canopy as Lark Matthews stepped over the boundary stone marking forbidden territory. Dry leaves crackled beneath her sneakers, each step a small rebellion against rules she'd never broken before. 2 weeks since Elijah had changed. 2 weeks of wondering what lurked among these trees. Her watch, scratched metal inherited from her sister, showed 17 minutes until complete darkness. The weight of her backpack pressed against her spine. Flashlight, water bottle, notebook filled with observations written in her cramped handwriting. And the jar of fireflies, their abdomens pulsing a biological Morse code that seemed to quicken as they ventured deeper. Elijah Green had walked this same path and returned, hollowed. The transformation subtle yet absolute. His freckles remained scattered like cinnamon across his nose. His cowlick still refused to lie flat, but something behind his eyes had collapsed, as if someone had carefully extracted everything essential while leaving the shell intact. When she asked him what happened, his mouth had formed a smile that never reached his eyes. "I just grew up, Lark," he had said, voice flat as a pressed flower. "That's all." Teachers praised his newfound maturity. Parents nodded approvingly at his stillness. Only Lark noticed how his pencils now lay perfectly parallel on his desk, how he no longer raced to the swings at recess, how the fireflies that once congregated at his window now avoided his house entirely. The path narrowed, tree branches interlaced overhead like gnarled fingers, grasping at the last copper light. Birds fell silent. The temperature dropped 3 degrees. Lark's breath clouded before her face. Then, a glimmer between the trees. The glass castle materialized through the gathering darkness like a mirage made solid. Not truly a castle, nor entirely glass, but an abandoned Victorian greenhouse that local legends attributed to an eccentric botanist from the previous century. Most adults insisted it had been demolished decades ago. Children knew better. Its dome rose between ancient oaks, panels of stained glass catching dying light in shards of ruby, amber, and cobalt. Iron framework, once black, now oxidized to the deep green blue of old pennies. Vines embraced the structure as if trying to pull it back into the earth. Moss-carpeted stone foundations cracked by seasons of freeze and thaw. Something was different tonight. The colors shifted across the panels like oil on water. The air around the structure vibrated with a frequency just below hearing, more pressure than sound. Lark's molars ached with it. "Hello?" Her voice emerged smaller than intended, a child's voice. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Is someone there?" No verbal response came, but the door, an arched gateway of twisted iron and midnight blue glass, swung inward with a sound like sighing. Lark hesitated. Heat prickled along her arms despite the autumn chill. This was the moment in every story where the foolish protagonist steps forward while readers silently scream warnings. The smart thing would be to turn around, to return to the safety of sidewalks and streetlights. She thought of Elijah's vacant eyes and crossed the threshold. Inside, dimensional logic surrendered to new rules. The interior stretched impossibly vast, far beyond what the exterior suggested could exist. Stone pathways wound between gardens, where plants with geometrically improbable shapes bloomed in colors that registered as wrongness in Lark's visual cortex. Fountains trickled water so clear it was visible only through movement. The glass ceiling soared overhead, showing stars that couldn't possibly be visible yet in the genuine sky outside. The air smelled of soil after lightning, of overripe fruit, of something metallic like old coins. "Your shoes are tracking mud on my pathways, Lark Matthews." The voice came from beside a pond where luminous fish traced lazy figure eights through black water. A woman sat on a bench of twisted branches, watching Lark with eyes that seemed to shift between colors with each blink. She wore a gardener's apron over clothes that shimmered between states, sometimes appearing woven from moonlight, sometimes like dried leaves pressed into fabric. Her hair might have been very dark or very white. It changed depending on how directly Lark looked at it. "How do you know my name?" Lark's fingers tightened around her backpack straps until her knuckles whitened. "Names have weight here." The woman's lips barely moved when she spoke. Especially yours, a singing bird that travels between worlds, quite fitting for one who crosses boundaries. She patted the bench beside her. The wood seemed to flex like muscle beneath her touch. Please sit. We've been expecting you. We? Lark remained standing, calculating the distance back to the door. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes, the same emptiness Lark had seen in Elijah. The castle and I. It's been so long since we had a visitor with potential. Elijah was disappointing. At the mention of Elijah, something hardened in Lark's chest. Fear crystallized into determination. What did you do to him? I offered him exactly what I'll offer you. The woman's fingernails, slightly too long, slightly too pointed, tapped against the bench. A chance to see the world as it truly is. She extended her hand over the pond. The water rippled, black surface tensing like skin. Images appeared. Lark's school, her home, her parents, her friends, but slightly wrong, as if reflected in a carnival mirror that distorted more than physical appearances. Children are told such pretty lies, the woman continued, her voice taking on the cadence of a bedtime story. That the world is fair, that hard work is always rewarded, that love conquers all. She sighed, and nearby flowers closed their petals. Then they grow up and learn the truth, piece by painful piece. But here, she gestured to the pond, I can show you everything at once. No more illusions, no more childish dreams. The water shifted again. Darker images materialized, forests burning into ash, adults turning away from extended hands, children learning cruelty from example. Even familiar faces from Lark's life, her gentle science teacher, her best friend Emma, appeared in moments of casual cruelty or calculated indifference. Lark's stomach clenched. That's not all they are. No, the woman acknowledged, something hungry entering her expression, but it's part of who they are. The part adults hide from children until they're ready to accept it. Elijah chose to see. He chose to grow up. The pond reflected Elijah's face, not as he was now, but in a moment Lark had never witnessed. His features contorting as realization dawned, followed by surrender. The life draining from him like water from cupped hands. Was this growing up? This surgical extraction of wonder? Lark reached into her backpack and withdrew the mason jar of fireflies. Their synchronized pulses created patterns like a silent language against the glass, illuminating her fingers from below with soft gold that emphasized rather than banished the surrounding darkness. If that's growing up, Lark said, her voice steadier than she expected, I don't want it. The woman's expression hardened. The temperature around them dropped 10 degrees in an instant. Nearby plants frosted over, crystals forming along leaf edges. It's not a choice, child. The world is what it is. Cruelty exists whether you acknowledge it or not. So does kindness, Lark countered, holding up the jar. The firefly's light seemed to strengthen in response. These fireflies shouldn't still be alive in October, but they are because every day I bring them fresh leaves from their preferred trees and drops of honey water. I've recorded their light patterns and discovered they communicate in sequences of 7 pulses. She unscrewed the jar, expecting the insects to fly away. Instead, they hovered around her hand like tiny, trusting stars, casting her skin in gold and the surrounding shadows in deeper black. The world is dark and unfair, and sometimes horrible, Lark continued, finding courage in the gentle illumination. But that's not all it is, and pretending that darkness is the only truth doesn't make you grown up. It just makes you, she paused, considering her next words carefully, half-blind. Something flickered across the woman's face, brief as the firefly's light, but profound in its revelation. Loneliness. Ancient and bone deep, the kind that comes from seeing only one side of existence for too long. You think I'm lonely? The woman's voice cracked like thin ice. I think, Lark said, choosing each word with deliberate care, the real question is whether you're showing people the truth, or just the truth you got stuck with. The glass castle held its breath. Flowers froze mid-bloom. The fish in the pond became motionless as painted images. The woman stared at Lark with eyes that had perhaps once been kind, before they had witnessed too much darkness without enough light to balance it. Clever child, she finally said, her voice softening into something almost human. But what of Elijah? Will you leave him to his wisdom? Lark thought about her friend, about the emptiness behind his eyes, about the precision with which he now placed his pencils, about the fireflies that no longer visited him. Can I bring him back here? The woman's laugh sounded like ice cracking in spring, destruction and renewal in the same sound. The castle welcomes who it chooses. She tilted her head, studying Lark as if seeing her for the first time. But perhaps. She moved with sudden fluidity, hand darting out to capture one of the fireflies hovering near Lark's wrist. The woman's fingers closed around the insect, not crushing it, but containing its light. She brought her closed hands to her lips and whispered something in a language that seemed to have too many consonants and not enough vowels. When she opened her palms, the firefly was suspended inside a glass marble, still alive, still pulsing with golden light. A reminder, she said, offering it to Lark. That light exists even in darkness. The marble felt warm against Lark's palm, vibrating slightly in time with the firefly's pulses. Not a prison, she realized, but a protective shell. Now go, the woman said, suddenly sounding exhausted. The time between day and night is ending, and the castle grows, unpredictable after dark. As if responding to her words, the stone paths began to shift like slow currents. Flowers that had been blooming now folded inward, revealing teeth-like thorns along their edges. The stars visible through the glass ceiling multiplied at an impossible rate, some detaching and drifting downward like embers. Lark backed toward the entrance, clutching the glowing marble. Will I see you again? The woman's form seemed to blur at the edges, becoming indistinguishable from the shadows stretching across the garden. That depends, she said, her voice already distant, on whether you remember what you've learned here. And what's that? Lark asked, 1 foot outside the door. For a moment, the woman's eyes cleared, ancient but suddenly present in a way they hadn't been before. That seeing truly means seeing completely. The light and the dark, the cruelty and the kindness. Growing up isn't surrendering wonder. Her form continued dissolving into the gathering darkness. It's carrying that wonder into places that need it most. The door swung shut with the sound of a final exhalation. The glass castle's colors dimmed until it was just another shadow among shadows. Night had fallen completely while Lark was inside, but somehow the path home remained faintly visible, luminescent moss marking the way like memory made tangible. The marble in her hand pulsed with steady gold light, just enough to illuminate 3 steps ahead, never the entire journey, but always enough to take the next step safely. Tomorrow, she would find Elijah. Tomorrow she would show him that growing up didn't mean growing cold. Perhaps that was the truest magic. Not ignoring darkness, but choosing to carry light into it regardless. The end. Thank you for listening to The Glass Castle, a work recorded and published by Millennia Publishing. Visit millenniapublishing.com to discover more. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest uploads.